Yeah, before we start though, I kind of wanted to talk about like the four kind of big deaths this week. It had four deaths that, yeah, was kind of close to me when I think about it. Yeah, four important kind of people who passed away. I just kind of want to mention it. The first is, yeah, not super popular amongst people, but I'll say the first is John Searle. John Searle is a philosopher of mind. Yeah, he probably most known for the Chinese room experiment. You don't need to know about all of that, but he's very influential in writings, and I actually like reference him a couple times. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of mention that. The second big one is Drew Struzan. Yeah, he kind of passed away. Um, yeah, real unfortunate. Uh, he was a big iconic person. In terms of like all these like really really famous um posters and that style and that look, and he's the person influential. Ironically and interesting that he died at a time when he could easily replicate his work with Gen AI and LLMs or whatever. But yeah, he's a kind of guy who just legacy wise live on. To the big one for me, yeah, Tomonobu Itagaki, yeah, R.I.P. to the Master Ninja himself. Yeah, one of the best like directors of action video games. In my humble opinion, one of my favorite video games ever, if not my favorite. Yeah, Ninja Gaiden remake, Ninja Gaiden Black most notably. Ninja Gaiden Black is probably the first game that actually made me lock in for the first time. But yeah, he kind of messed up his career somewhere along the lines with involving some sexual harassment kind of thing. Everybody kind of make the joke, yeah, if he wasn't so thirsty, he'd still have a career. It's unclear how he died though. I just heard illness, and then some people imply suicide, but I'm not sure what's going on with that. Right, something like that. Yeah. And yeah, last but not least, yeah, D'Angelo. Second big South Korean to go and leave. A true genius by all working accounts. He could have been the next prince. Like, if I understand, he had a lot of like hang-ups involving his image and sexuality, and kind of didn't want to be famous for that. But from what I understand, he was like, yeah, he could have easily be the next prince, right? We know him for the one video untitled, right? It's a true classic. Like, that is the one thing you know him for. He joined Dilla with in the Sky there, and the RIP to a real one. So yeah, four real ones who kind of was in a mental phenomenological orbit. Thinking about them, and like, all right, I'll lose four people who kind of, I won't say close to my car, I don't know them, but like, yes, four people who kind of influence my thinking in all kind of ways, right? Yeah, so just mention these four big deaths happen in a week. So yeah, that's that.
Ready for an epic battle.
We need to get out of here.
What's wrong with Cuba?
Whatever it is, it's not my fault. I've been busy committing healthcare fraud, and I've got the paper trail to prove it.
The mission is almost complete.
This planet needs a purge.
Oh, yeah. Earth was great while it lasted.
This has gone too far. We're going to save the world. My family loves Earth, and I love my family.
A little help here.
Terry, you beamed yourself into the ceiling again.
Alright folks, so let us talk about the sixth and final season of Solar Opposites, which for the most part we have been covering
it's cancelled,
since.
Right? It's properly cancelled there.
Is it cancelled, or the creators just decided to wrap up?
No, I think it got cancelled. Although the way how it ended is like, yeah, there's like a kind of ending, kind of. I mean, I suppose.
Alright.
But yeah, it's a show that we'll get into this, but it's a show that I totally understand why it's done. Like, the nature of the show is like, it runs its course.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
And her take, yeah, this is probably the worst season. Like,
oh wow, okay. So
Yeah.
we're gonna have another debate review here. Okay,
Right.
okay, interesting, right? Yeah. So I think if I'm not mistaken, we have been covering every season of the show since it dropped, right?
Yep.
And it would make sense for us to talk about it because we were talking about Rick and Morty. I don't think that we talked about it from the very beginning, right? But yeah, as the series grew and whatnot, we were talking about Rick and Morty, right? And never so often, we would talk about we would just do episode by episode, not so much breakdowns, but reviews of them, right? But yeah, we didn't think that we would actually get not so much a spin-off of Rick and Morty, but a show that was made by, its co-creator, Justin Roiland, right? And this
Right.
show, would appear on Hulu as opposed to Adult Swim, right? But yeah, I think if I'm not
Yeah, I
mistaken,
think
we have
it's
covered.
also Mike McMahon, right?
I
Also Mike McMahon made this. Who did Star Trek Lower Decks?
Oh, okay. I
Um,
didn't know he worked on that.
I think it's this he will also work on, and yeah, it's not, yeah, as they say, not a it's a, I think it was a kind of spiritual spin-off of sorts, right? Like
Yes.
it's very Rick and Morty coded, in its conceits and the jokes kind of, but then it does a lot of like interesting things on its own right, and it's funny in its own right. But then where it shined was this subplot of sorts, this total
Yes.
parallel narrative that you're supposed to take very seriously, and it's framed and tonal very serious, and it works. Like shockingly, it works for what it was. Like, all right, that was the shine. That whole wall plot line.
Yes.
Like, all right, well, it's real hard.
And
And then they build from there,
and,
and
and,
it,
and then
it I
and then they
think
did another one called Silver Cups. I think it
right.
was in the third season that they did it. Yeah, they started the third
That's
season, and then it just grew from then up until, slight spoiler, the finale of the season itself. But more on that
right.
later. But yeah, go on.
Yeah. And that's the thing is that there's a whole thing to it, right? And I'll just argue that the stuff that are supposed to take seriously gets weaker with time, and then the show that are not supposed to take seriously, the comedy part also got weaker with time. I felt it just got less funny, or at least the joke plays out. It played out too fast. Like, that's the problem with the show now, and they kind of forget their own conceit and just kind of keep changing it. And then, well, the whole thing with the whole Justin Roiland voice thing. All right, that kind of funny, I suppose, in retrospect. But that's kind of like the Tolkien thing in South Park.
Yeah.
Uh,
Um.
it was
You,
it was always retroactively. Go ahead. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
But as I say that, right? What I will give this series credit for, and yes, folks, we will share our thoughts on the series as a whole at the very end, right? What I will give the show credit for is that it was able to do something that I haven't seen a sitcom do since, wait for it, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, where you have 6 full seasons of a show, and after the third season, they change one of the lead actors. So you see, like how in Fresh Prince, they
Right.
change the mom, they change Vivian.
Right.
In this case, they change Corvo from Justin Roiland to
Right.
Dan Stevens. And for me,
Right.
yes, I mean Justin did his thing, right? But the problem I had even early on was that he sounded very much like Rick Sanchez, right? But that's kind of the joke. But at the same time, it's like, but you couldn't even do a little extra effort with the inflection on the voice, bro. Like, it literally sounds like the
Right.
same character, right? Or it's Dan Stevens, that exaggerated British accent. I think works perfectly in my opinion, right? Because
Right.
yeah, it
Right.
just adds to the sort of tight ass character that Corvo is, right? So like that's the way how he talks. Bollocks! I just dropped a pupa. I hate humans. Humans are so fickle.
Right.
The way how he talks, it adds a lot to the character, right? While the first iteration of, or I should say the first version of Corvo was more like this very, okay, everything needs to be precise, and why people laughing at me because of how everything needs to be precise. That was the character, right? But there's a change of character, if you will, or the change of tone, I think worked brilliantly for Corvo, in my opinion, right? But yeah, I mean, agree to disagree, but yeah, Ricardo, I mean, as we're talking about the series now, before we get into the season, yeah, your thoughts on, the switching of voice actors now to play the.
Oh yeah, that what the meta commentary of him not sounding anything like the old voice is what make it funny. And again, what make it also funny is that, again, the retroactive, because of the sci-fi nature, they should have come up with some retroactive timey-wimey nonsense as to why it was always like that. They're like, okay, that's funny. Like, that is it. I mean, but as I said, I don't know, the show just comes across as Rick and Morty light. It doesn't do anything in terms of like exploratory character stuff, in my opinion, for any of the characters. Like, the character like a book, and then they do something with the AI, and they do some kind of funny things, and but none of it was like, after a while, it nowhere near, it didn't stay as relatively fresh as Rick and Morty did, in my opinion. Um, no, I didn't have anything to like pull from, like like say with Star Trek. So that it never really worked for me, in my opinion. Never really worked for me in any meaningful sense. So that is about it. Like it this season was funny, kind of, but none of it was like working for me. Like, especially that what's the episode with the, oh gosh, the third episode, I think, where they had to like get into this commune thing, and I like, none of this working for me though. Falling flat. And maybe again, I tell myself, maybe I'm too tired for this or getting too old or something like that. It's like, no, if you keep me interested, I'll keep interested. Like like I say, something like a World Battle After Another or something like that, right? So this is that. Like I just think the show just get real stale. The show stale, and they realize it gets stale, and then they move on from that, and then they make like a meta joke of characters referencing, and that not that funny because Rick and Morty did it already. I'm not sure. Like I don't know who this for. Like they make a great joke of, well, if the show started when you were 14 and you were laughing at it, you're 21 now, so you shouldn't really find it funny anymore. Like okay, that kind of funny, maybe. So I don't know. It's just one of those. It run its course. It kind of get along the tooth, and it's time for it to end. And then none of the wall stuff land for me. None of it, right? I could not care less this time around. Like I was keeping track of it, and then like wow, none of this like supposedly drama stuff work because it's so distant from what it was now. Like they do this big time skip thing, which is kind of was like slight spoiler there. I don't know, like it's just a bunch of jokes that just run its course, and it not funny anymore. That's how I feel about it.
All right. Well, just to jump briefly into what this season is about, right? So, what I will give this show credit for is that there is a true line, right? A very, very thin true line, but it's effective enough for what it is, right? Where basically, our characters, the opposites, Corvo, Jesse, Yomilak, and Terry, right? And of course, the pupa and, to extent Aisha, played by McGill, Tiffany Haddish, right? They're still stuck on Earth and whatnot. And throughout this season, well, not throughout, right? But ever so often, they will be, they'll reintroduce the whole idea of the mission, right? Which from the very beginning was to terraform Earth and, rebuild utopia, right?
Yeah, via the people, because the people could like evolve him towards the mission, right?
Yeah. So what they set up here, and I actually like that they mostly stuck to it, right? Is the whole idea of, okay, through some shenanigans which I won't get into, our sci-fi weapons or sci-fi items, right? And one thing I kind of like the show for is always taking like the ridiculous amount of tech and the powers that they have and saying, oh, it's just sci-fi items and sci-fi tech or whatever you want to call it, right? Yeah, all the sci-fi tech, I should say a majority of them got destroyed, so now they have no way to use that to make money, so they broke now, and now they had to kind of find ways to make money. So I like that it just sort of branches out into all these like different little mini adventures that make up, a majority of the season here, right? So I like that there was like a focus, if you will, right? And I'll get to what to me is the show's biggest strength and weakness, right? But I'll get to that in a bit, right? But in between that, there is the wall stuff, right? And and it involves, oh gosh, I'm forgetting the woman's name, right? The mother. Yeah, she hatches this all or nothing plan, all or nothing plan basically to get out of the wall, right? And if you remember, it's just basically this sort of like plastic, let's just say a file cabinet, if you will, with a bunch of shrunk humans that, Yomilak, because he was just on some petty bullshit, just use a shrink ray to just shrink all these people and just throw them in there, and so they start this society, right? But yeah, I mean, the sell of that narrative, that second narrative was about, it was just kind of introducing these cinematic themes, these stories. It's all about, oh, we're going to take down this evil despot, and, it's all this rivalries and backstab and all that kind of stuff, right? But it involves these shrunk humans, and they're taking all these small items, like what we associate as small now, like paper clips and, paper clips and coins and whatnot. But, that's part of the world of the wall, right? And it's just about all these characters trying to survive. But in the case of this mother, the whole idea was escaping, and she actually escaped in the last season, ran into the dictator that ran the place, actually, voiced by Alfred Molina. But yeah, they do this weird subplot with him now where he suddenly forgot his memory, so he forgot, or he was like trying to subdue all the bad memories he had of just being this cruel dictator and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, all this is just to lead up to them trying to get the shrink ray for themselves to free themselves, right? And I'll talk about that subplot in a bit, right? And for me, while I was watching all this, I was telling myself, as much as I was enjoying the wall stuff during the course of this show, All right, so for me, like while I was watching this season, I was there like, all right, well, where the Silver Cup stuff is, because to me, the Silver Cups storyline ultimately became the better of the two subplots in this show, in this series, right? But yeah, I was watching this, I was like, wait, where the Silver Cup stuff, right? And then, slight spoiler, they wait until episode 9, because this is a 10 episode run and not a 12 episode run like last time, right? To drop it in, right? And I will admit, even though they sped up the premise and try to wrap things up in a kind of a neat note, I really enjoy those moments though, because yeah, for me, I just always dug that Silver Cup stuff, the way how they just poke fun at Buddy Cup and action and military films and whatnot, how they did that. And this mere fact, it's centered on this guy who loves Fast and Furious way too much. Yeah, that just worked for me, right? But yeah, you literally have to wait till near the end of the season to get that, right? What I will say though, right, as I start to get into my review of the season, right, is that it leads to a very, very nice plot twist.
I don't know.
It turns out how they relate the Silver Cup stuff to
Roman. I read it was real dumb.
I know. Like, it's not meant to be taken seriously at all. It's very, very convenient. But you see it, I was like, all right, I get why, and it's kind of funny. Kind of funny when you think about like, these two things actually relate.
But that's my thing, is that it's not just not. It wasn't even that engaging or funny. It's like, okay, it's that kind of interesting to us maybe, but like at this point I kind of don't care, and too much time passed. That's the problem. So like if it completely rewrites the narrative, like the whole point. I suppose, but like yeah, I thought this was like, that's how they ended it. Alright, I suppose that's enough. Moving on. But yeah, I thought this didn't work for me, and that twist is, well, the reveal or whatever, the final thing involved with the silver clubs and the gold clubs and them. I thought that was terrible. Like, it's like, are they serious? Like, that's what we're doing? Alright, I kind of don't care about this. Moving on. I don't know. This just felt really flat for me. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So for me, right? So just to get to the whole aspect of the show and the season, which I felt is both the biggest strength and weakness, right? The humor, as irreverent as it is, as over the top as it is, as envelope pushing as it is, right? And I actually like that, right? I feel like it just pushes envelopes way more than Rick and Morty does, right? In my opinion, right? Just how razor sharp and how fast the humor goes, I think is a strength. It really distinguishes this show from Rick and Morty, right? Just how the lines are delivered, just how everything moves now. It's always at a quick pace, right? And I mean, like, I'm no comedy writer, right? But that is a skill, dude, just to be able to just do so much in a short space of time, right? But that being said, though, I would admit that has been the show's biggest weakness, I would say, from the jump, though, because compared to Rick and Morty, this show kind of just foregoes, like, all right, like Rick and Morty, I mean, yes, it's been going on for 8 seasons now, and that show has been going on way too long, in my opinion, right? I think, listen, I honestly think that they might sort of wrap things up at season 10, but listen, this is season 8 by now, right? They should have wrapped things up a long time ago, right? But anyway, but at least with Rick and Morty, there was more of an emotional core to things, right? And there was more of an intelligent side to things, right? It wasn't just parodies of movies and, sci-fi tropes for the sake of it, right? It was clever. It was witty. It was genuinely clever, right? So you don't have to be like the biggest sci-fi fan or read every single influential sci-fi novel known to man to get the humor, but you'll know enough of it because of its references over time in film to be like, oh, I get where they're coming from with this and that, and especially when they touch on pop culture and comic books and stuff like that, right? So there's always a wittiness to it, right? But then there's always this emotional center to it all, especially when it comes to Rick and all the skeletons that are in his closet that eventually come out through his adventures with Morty and all that kind of stuff. So there's always like an emotional core to everything, right? So that's why when it comes to the finales, usually that's when they come with like the biggest gut punches of it all. Like, not all of them are meant to make you feel sad, but it's like, wow, but like, I didn't know this about you, Rick, or maybe that's why this thing that happened before, you know what I mean? That's why it comes back here. So there's always this sort of like reverberance of things that you saw before, of consequences now, showing up with with every season, right? This show just forgoes emotion altogether. And to me, like the closest thing to emotion that we get in terms of the solar opposite stuff is that it's just, oh, we're a family and we need to stick together. Okay, fine, that's emotional, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, okay. And then
To
when it
me,
comes to
Aisha had an arc better than them.
yes, you're right, because there was one involvement, I think, in the last season. I think it's where she left the opposites, and she was trying to like live her own life, but it didn't play out the way she wanted to. I think that's how it went.
I
But that was like a
also
long
wanted them to do more. That would have been interesting. They did okay in the beginning of the season. They did this kind of double personality thing with Aisha. I thought they could have do more with that. Maybe I wish we
Right.
got more of that this season.
That's true. Yeah.
Whatever.
As
I
far
thought I was gonna come back up,
yeah.
and it didn't.
And as far as the Walt stuff goes, okay, this whole quest about trying to free yourself, okay, that was always strong, right? But the problem is, because this narrative, unfortunately, just ran way too long, I just found myself not really remembering much or caring much about what went down in the war, right? And you would think that, okay, like this is the season where the war stuff is gonna come to this big crescendo, and yet it doesn't.
Exactly.
Like, okay, it starts off kind of strong with the whole quest to get out and get the shrink ray, but then they throw in this dumb subplot about trying to get a new like a puppet dictator. I was like, why would you have that? That makes no fucking sense at all. And they spend so much time on it. And then when Alfred Molina's character comes back, they throw in this whole thing about him with the memory. And like, why are we doing all this, right? The point of it should be about them freeing themselves. Okay, and then we get that, right? Now, there is an episode dedicated to that, right? And I was digging it, right? I know fans are gonna be split on the final moment of it. I am somewhat indifferent to it, but I thought it was kind of ballsy that they ended the show. They ended the whole narrative like that, though. Okay? It ends on a very, very bleak note. I can't say it totally works so, but I kind of admire the bravery in saying, yeah, this is how we end it. Like, I'm not gonna spoil what happens. Like, yeah, this is the end. All I was just say without spoiling anything is that it ultimately ends up being the human's fault, which was kind of always the running theme of the wall stuff, is that for all the talk about wanting to change for the better, there's always this human error. There's always a human saying, no, we can't do it this way. So it's this kind of selfishness now. So ultimately you see where it all led up to. But it's like, all right, well, that's how they ended. Okay, right? As far as the silver cups go, I was really disappointed in the fact that they sort of ended it. Like, they just sort of sped things, sped the narrative down there. I felt like instead of spending so much time on the wall, and you could just take out all the stuff involving, the former dictator and all that bullshit. You could have had, segments about the silver cups and build that narrative even more. So when you get to the big reveal, it's like, oh, okay, at least they build it up better, you know what I mean? And how it ends, like, all right, well, they end it, so okay, I guess. Well, what I will say without spoiling anything is that it actually ends on a happier note compared to the wall stuff. Like, the wall stuff end real bleak. This one ends kind of happy. I was like, all right, I could kind of live with that, I guess, right? But yeah, as far as the opposite go, it's just the same insane shenanigans that they get into. And again, like, as much as I admire the quick, irreverent humor, at times it does border on juvenile. And, I don't want to say that for sure about this, but yeah, sorry, at times the humor really does border on juvenile. It's crass and it's vulgar. And I like the show. I like the fact that this season and the show itself stuck to that, right? It is very in your face when it comes to the humor, but at the same time, it's a lot that they throw at you. It's very, very crass, to the point where, yeah, at some moments the jokes fall flat. Oftentimes they sort of roll your eyes like, oh gosh, it's like you're almost trying to get a rise out of me by showing me this or having a character say this or whatever it is, right? So, for example, there's this weird subplot involving a character who curses, right? And the joke is we're censoring all the curses, but the point of the joke is, the character just curses in such a unbelievable level that we have to censor because it's Hulu, man. Right. And that's a joke. Like, all right, that's a joke. Yeah. Okay. And it doesn't even go anywhere with that.
This just feel like first draft stuff. Like, that's the main vibe I got from it. Like, it felt like first draft stuff. And they could have I don't know what happened, but they're missing, you need that person to punch up the humor to carry it to a level to have it be working, and it just wasn't there. And most of the jokes were just fell flat for me. Like I get it, I get the joke, and this might have made me laugh back when the show first started, maybe, right? Maybe, but you need to like build and evolve now, and it just wasn't there for me.
Yeah, well, last thing last, right? I know I will confess, right, as a wrap up here, right? There were some moments that genuinely had me cracking up, though. You know what I mean? Like genuinely had me laughing. Some, and I will give the show this season and the show credit for leaning a lot more into absurd humor than Rick and Morty does. Like Rick and Morty was always sort of like meta. This one is meta as well, right? But it leans so much into absurdist humor to the point that, like, like at times I just be in disbelief that that somebody sat down and create this shit, but at the same time they sort of laugh at just like, wow, like somebody really signed up for this to see this sort of laughing at this, the absurdity of it all, right? But yeah, ultimately, this was a show, this was a season, I should say, that I felt they really could have punched things up because it is the final season, right? Now that you tell me that this show is cancelled, like, oh well, that explains why the show had felt very sped up, very rushed, in my opinion, right? Yeah, I just thought that the creators themselves just sort of felt like, yeah, I think we done, I think that we pull way too much ideas out of our asses, so let me just wrap things up. And now you tell me that the show is actually cancelled, and that's why this is the final season. So it kind of makes sense why the show is just the way how it is. Sorry, the season is the way how it is, right? But yeah, while there are some funny moments and it will, appeal to the fans of the show, it will also disappoint them as well in terms of just how the arcs, I should say the main story arcs, as the opposites, the Wall and the Silver Cups arcs end. Yeah, they really could have spent more time in terms of just fleshing things out and not asking for a lot, for a ton of emotion and, tugging at my heartstrings or whatnot, but still kind of give us a more satisfying conclusion to all three of these arcs. And yeah, we could have had a stellar final season, right? But for me, for what it was, I will still give this a very light 3.5 out of 5. I will still say that it is worth checking out. But this is more for the fans of the show, for the people who still tuned into the show and gave it a chance. I would imagine within this 6-season run, people probably just sort of tuned out and felt like, wow, this is just like a juvenile version of Rick and Morty. Why should I care? But then at the same time with Rick and Morty, that show is now has, its 8th season has gone now. So we see we have to wait now for the 9th one. And well, again, I think that they might wrap things up at the 10th, but like
right.
by now it's just way too far,
Yeah, with Rick and Morty, even though I don't love it as I used to, it's still like gas sense of evolution. This not so much. This is like I do the thing, it wrap it up, I suppose, and like I don't know where you're gonna go. Well, and I totally understand why you get cancelled. Because just the I don't know. It just the material isn't there. Like it could have really like do the writing better, and that's my main problem is that this felt very first drafty and didn't really work and didn't really feel like it evolved in a meaningful sense. At least to me.
Just want to mention just general thoughts on the show here quickly, right? So as a whole, as a conceit, it's these aliens who have no idea of how Earth works, right? So at the same time, they're over-exaggerating what they think it means to be, someone who lives on Earth, but at the same time poking fun, like laughing or scoffing at, us Earthlings and whatnot. It was a good conceit, right? It was a great conceit, I must say, right? So I would say like the first couple of seasons really built on that, and it made for like some of the best seasons on the show, right? But over time, it just just to pull from what you said about evolution, yeah, it just sort of devolved into just overly crass, overly vulgar, way too over the top. Throwing away, logic and, character depth and emotion more for just quick jokes and whatnot, right? Yeah, and just poking fun at itself, at pop culture, at meta humor, and just everything. It's just poking fun at every single thing without really coming down, without really focusing on just like a emotion, just just for a reason for us to care about this family, right? And same thing goes for the subplots, right? The Wall stuff, which starts off strong, but then sort of end like, okay, that's how you're gonna end it, all right? And for the Silver Cup stuff, which to me is like the biggest highlight of this series as a whole, just sort of wrapping things up way too quickly, right? So the season, I will give a light 3.5 out of 5, as I said earlier. The show as a whole, I would give this a decent 3.5 out of 5. I would say that it is worth checking out, but it is more for the fans of Rick and Morty or people who just enjoy very crass adult animated comedies, right? They will enjoy that, right? I can't say that, the normal crowd or people who just want to watch something that's irreverent but very clever and very entertaining, I can't say that they will enjoy this. This is more for the Rick and Morty crowd. I would imagine that, yeah, some of the diehard fans of Rick and Morty probably tune out to the show probably midway. As soon as Justin was replaced by Dan, maybe that's when they tuned out, or maybe later on. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if a majority of the people who were on the Solar Opposites hype train from the start probably tuned out by then, right? But I wouldn't say it's a show that was absolutely I wouldn't say it wasn't worth my time. Like it gave me some great laughs or whatnot, but it's not a show that ultimately will stick with me, right? I'll more remember it as just something that came out because Rick and Morty exists, right? But still give it a look. If it's for you, it's for you. If it's not, it's not, right? But I would say, if it doesn't wow you after the first couple of seasons, I mean, you could tune out and, go back to watch whatever else you were watching, and I'll leave it at that. But yeah, sorry for the interruption there, Ricardo, but yeah, you could share your final thoughts on this season and, the series as a whole.
Yeah, just written just like I don't know what to say about 6 out of 10, 5 out of 10 this season. As a show overall, yeah, it's a solid show for what it was at the time and when it came out, and especially as a kind of counterpart to Rick and Morty. I'll give it like about a 7 out of 10, or maybe like a close to 8 when it was funny. It was genuinely funny, especially first and second season. But yeah, I don't know, this show just kind of just drop. It just dropped off for me, and I couldn't get into it as it was. The pacing, it just kind of fell flat, or it just didn't evolve in any meaningful sense to me, at least. And I suppose that's just me. Yeah, right. So that's about it.